Right, the first step after you receive your 11,000 pound floor plate or 9,000 pound floor plate, they're similar except the 11's bigger. What we do is while it's still, we unwrap it, and then while it's still bolted to the shipping crate, we grease the pulleys. So we remove the pins and re-grease the upper and lower pulleys. As you can see here, he puts a healthy amount of grease and then greases the pulley axle a little bit, and then slide the cable sheave on there, pulley, whatever you want to call it here. We already have, in this case, our customer is doing an outside install. He's going to put a cover over the, so we pull the arms out, and we bring a table with us when we do an install, and we have everything laid out here on the bench, which I'll unpack and update you here. I put the arms on top of a dolly upside down so I can cut the plastic off and then just wheel them over to where the lift will be located. And as you can see here, the customer made a couple of marks, and what I'm going to do is just make an even number off the end of the pad for him. Try to get it centered on here. So that's part one. Next, I'll remove the shipping bolts from the top of the column, 17 millimeter. You'll see that on both ends, top of each column, 17 millimeter bolts times 2. Remove the bolts. I'll remove the 2 inside 22 millimeter shipping bolts that are bolted to the base plate on either end. I'll do the inside on this end and then the inside on the opposing end before I remove the outside bolts. That way when I go to remove the bolts, my arm does not get trapped in between the 2 lift columns if they shift. Now we'll remove the 2 inside bolts on the opposite end. Now he'll work his way to the outside bolts. Yeah, right here. Yeah, and we're going to do the other end. Right now that I have the unit unpacked and I have the ground marked in proximity to the customer's markings, I use the chalk line and then I just trace it over with yellow. As you can see, it's good to have a good set of dollies handy for this type of work. And next we'll be standing the column up and riding this chalk line to the overall width marking. All right, now that we have the lift standing on the chalk line, which I've marked with a paint pen, if you can, hopefully you can see it there, we will prop the carriages up about 4 inches off the ground. We use a 4x4 on the left and right, and then I take and slide the base plate in place. All right, so now I haven't drilled any holes yet, but I have the lift on the chalk line, carriages propped up 4 inches with a 4x4 so I could fit the base plate in. Both sides are riding the line nice. In this case today, the floor is extremely level, so next thing to do is look inside and just make sure you've got about 1/8 of an inch of gap between the base plate and the floor plate that covers your cables. All right, next you'll notice the cables are already laced in the lift when you get it. And what I like to do is, before we do anything, I come over and I show about 5 or 6 threads and I lock it in so that it's the jam nut is holding. You'll see it in the back of the post there. I do that on both sides as the next step. So for the next thing we do is we use 2 levels, and I find out where the low spot in the ground is, and I can see that it's this corner by looking at the levels. Let's take a look at that level with the camera there. All right, it has to come up on, it's going to come up towards the middle and up from this end. So I get down on the ground And just looking at the space that I already see under the lift, I can tell that there's about a 1/8 of an inch shim. Pretty close. Try another one on this side. This is just the preliminary before we drill. There's nothing worse than drilling the holes on an angle because the base plate was on an angle, and then you go to knock the bolts in and they don't go in. That makes for a long day. So it looks like I need another 1/16 of an inch shim. And your lift will come with metal shims, but you can purchase these online. And now if you look at the levels for me, you'll notice that both levels are pretty much dead on now. So that's just your preliminary shim. I'm going to come back and fill in all the gaps before we tighten all the bolts down. Next we're going to drill the holes on this side. This will be the off side. 3/4 inch masonry auger and rotary hammer. Square that up a little better. There you go. All right, now we're going to drill our holes on the off side, which we've used as our first column here. We've got it plumb. Now go ahead. Next we vacuum up all the dust and we clean out the holes with the brush. Sorry. Holes are all vacuumed out and the side walls are clean with the brush. You can blow them out with a compressor as well. I've got it shimmed up following the contour of the concrete pad. If the concrete has a rough surface, sometimes it'll appear like it's a little high on the side that you're shimming. Just don't worry, because when you tighten it up, it'll crush down a little. All right, so see how I have it shimmed? And wherever I can slide a shim underneath, I try to get them under there. I want this thing to be nice and snug against the ground for our customer. Next we will prepare the epoxy and the bolts. All right, so next what I do is I've had a lot of battles with epoxy. When you fill the holes, halfway and sometimes a little more than, the bolts tend to hydrolock, like they won't go down any further. So for the last few years I've been mixing the epoxy on a piece of cardboard and then mixing it up real quick, and then I have Conley ready to hammer the bolts in as I hand them to him one by one. What I do is I put it on the bolt. I don't like to go too high up on the threads to catch the nut, which would be a problem, and then hand them off, and Conley knocks them in, as you can see. And now we'll get them started. We'll tighten them up a few threads and let them set for a few. Sometimes if it's cold, I let them set for 24 hours and have the customer go back, because you want to go back and check your bolts regularly. It's like 30mm socket and a torque wrench. Right now we have side 2 shimmed up, level, and we're on the line nice. Base plate in the center, everything looks good. Just double check everything. We can start drilling. I may have to go back and add a little bit of shim, which is no problem, but we're close enough for drilling. We have side 2 drilled and the holes cleaned out, and we have it on level here. We're going to prepare the concrete anchors and epoxy for round 2. Right now he'll go and hammer in that last concrete anchor. Next step, we'll raise the carriages up and run the cables and hoses. Okay, I've run the first cable. So if you remember from the beginning of our video, I had I tightened the jam nut. Now that cable passes down through the carriage around the lower pulley, runs across the floor, around the lower pulley on the offside leg, up to the top, around the pulley from the back, and then down and through. And then you have the adjuster nut here, as you can see. I think you can see there. Okay, we'll tighten that up. Now I'll run the other cable the same way. The cables are installed. Before I tighten the cables to proper tension, I'll show you how to install the hydraulic line that goes across on the bottom. Basically goes under the cylinder and pops up. There'll be a fitting facing the ground, a 90-degree fitting, and there's a 90-degree on the end of each cable. It's that easy. Right underneath that little mouse hole there. And then you come around the back of each column, connect the hose to the fitting, as you see. I'll do that now. First side fitting is tight, 19 millimeter, 3/4 inch wrench. Snug it up. Not too tight. You don't want to strip it out. That'll make for a bad day. All right, now I have the second hydraulic line that pressurizes from the pump installed to the bottom there. And next I will snug the cables. All right, next I'll tighten up the cable using a 24 millimeter gear wrench. I hold it with a pair of vice grips so it isn't jumping all over the place on me. And you'll follow me over here, Conley. I'll tighten this cable. I've already done this offside here. So I have it on the 25 inches off the floor. I reach up about a foot above the carriage. Let's say that's about a foot. And I squeeze the two cables together, and I can get it to about an inch without really cranking. So I take two fingers and a thumb. You don't want it too tight because it'll bend the pulley brackets if you over tighten it. The cylinders actually are so strong they'll pull it down. So just snug, but not over. I've tightened the offside here, and I'm about a foot above the carriage, okay? Just a little bit more than a foot, and I squeeze with two fingers. And see how the cable is nice and snug, but not overly tight? It's not rock tight where when you try to lift, you'll bend the pulley. You can literally bend the pulley brackets. I made the mistake one time, and I had to go out and make a repair. So just get it snug, and you want to have till you have about an inch between your fingers when you pinch with your index, middle, and your thumb, right there. Right? Now if you come over to this side, the way I tighten these is a 24 millimeter gear wrench, and I put a pair of vice grips on there to hold it, just like that. And that's it. Next you want to, you might have to crack this loose, align the lowering valve so it's straight, and then tighten the nut here, okay? After you've tightened the cables. Next we'll install the jam nuts. It's the 24 millimeter nut goes on. And you snug that up on there on both sides. So you have an adjustment in the back as well, so if you run out of adjustment in the front, which I don't think you will, you can use that backside adjustment as well and pull up on it. Get a wrench and snug that up. We install the arms by simply sliding them over the torsion tube. Watch your fingers when you're doing it. And get it lined up. And we have the pins ready over here with some grease. So you very simple. Next we will install the arm restraints. The pin goes down, put a little pressure on the arm, like I'm leaning on it for Conley here, and you slide the spring on, and then there's a roll pin that pops through the hole. I'll stay there, we'll take a picture. Next we'll drop the base plate in the center. It just rests in there. It's that easy. If you need to pop it up for easy cleaning, there it is. Pop it down. Good to go. Remove the plastic from the cylinders. When that stuff gets bunched up, it can cause chaos, or even plug up the air vent on the cylinder and prevent the cylinder from going up and down. Air gets trapped. And I'll do this side in a moment. The other thing you want to do is grease the inside of the posts you start off with a spray grease, is a little easier. Keep it wet in there so there's less friction. Nice spray grease. Do the corners. Do the fronts too. The straw right on the tube there. Okay. Next, you can see the safety latch up inside there. Hopefully you can get a good view of it right now. I spray that with spray grease. Spray the whole thing, get it wet, so the plates will slide. Prevent it from sticking. Now we have the lift installed. We've lubricated the chains. We've lubricated the corners of the columns inside. And she's pretty much ready to work. And torque the anchors to between 100 and 110 pounds. I like to get 110 pounds on each anchor. I use a diagonal crisscross pattern when tightening. All right, Thursday, June 10th, we've just completed this Universalift 11KF for our customer, and everything went together nice. We got it plumb and square on the new concrete pad, and I guess they have plans to put a shelter over this or something. Get that motor covered up, because you want to keep it out of the weather if you can. But looks good. You're on the way. You'll have your little oasis backyard, all your toys and stuff, and now we're on our way to our next job. We hope you're having a great week out there. We look forward to seeing you soon.